So even if Chris Paul stays healthy, I wouldn't be surprised if we see Phoenix do some kind of load managing on the fly with him. He has a chance to be this season's biggest fantasy bust.
On this video, we'll give you 3 bold predictions for the NBA 21-22 fantasy basketball season. I'm Alan Seslowsky here with Nick Whalen. Nick, let's first define what a bold prediction is. It's a 20th percentile outcome, something that is plausible but unlikely. What is your first bold prediction?
My first bold prediction is that I think Anthony Davis struggles again this season. I think he finishes outside the top 25 in both per game and total value. This is a guy that a couple of years ago was a top 5, if not a top 3 pick in a lot of fantasy drafts. And, the injuries have always been a part of his story. Those caught up to him again last season. But what was far more concerning to me is that even when he was on the court, Anthony Davis did not look like the player that we saw in the NBA bubble in those playoffs where he dominated during the Lakers' run to the title. His numbers were down in virtually every single category, including percentages. He was a sub 30% three-point shooter. His free throw percentage was way down. That's what made him so valuable in 2019-20. I think with all the changes that the Lakers made this season, first and foremost, bringing in Russell Westbrook, I don't know that any of these really help Anthony Davis. I think long-term, they certainly added talent, and the Lakers are going to be right there when it comes to winning the title. But bringing in a high-volume, rebound-stealing guard like Anthony Davis, like Russell Westbrook, I don't think that helps Anthony Davis from a rebounds perspective. I don't think the addition of Westbrook helps him from a scoring perspective. I think LeBron James, you look at his numbers, those have pretty much been bulletproof regardless of which stars are around him. Anthony Davis has a little bit struggled, to assert himself in certain situations. And I think there's a chance that he kind of becomes the third banana here.
Where would you draft Anthony Davis? How far would he have to fall for you to take him?
I still feel comfortable taking him middle end of the second round.
Anthony Davis, not a top 15 player in fantasy basketball. That is a bold prediction. Okay, what's your second bold prediction for 21-22 fantasy basketball season?
I love this 2021 rookie class. I think there's a ton of talent. There's a lot of names that are going to be headliners in the NBA for a long time. But when you're talking strictly fantasy value, I don't know that a single one of these guys is going to finish in the top 75 in total value. We saw LaMelo Ball do this last season. We saw Tyrese Halliburton do it last season. You have some huge names: Jalen Green, Cade Cunningham, Evan Mobley, Jalen Suggs, Scotty Barnes, the top 5 picks. Everybody loves all 5 of those guys. There's red flags around all these guys in terms of strictly their fantasy value. Cade Cunningham is already hurt. He has not played at all in the preseason. He's in a situation in Detroit where he is going to be the main component of that rebuild, but you also have some talent around him. You have Jeremy Grant, you have a developing big man in Isaiah Stewart. There's really no reason for them to rush Cade Cunningham back.
No rookies in the top 7 rounds. That is a bold prediction since, people love drafting the rookies. Give me your third bold prediction for this fantasy season.
We're going to go with a more positive one for my third prediction.
Thank God, man. This was starting to become a real bummer, man.
Yeah. Paul George, I think he has a top 5 fantasy season in him this year. He's been kind of in that 20 to 25-ish range over the last 2 years since coming to LA. And that comes with the territory of being the second guy next to Kawhi Leonard. But we know Kawhi Leonard will not be active for most of the season. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't play a single regular season game. I think people who are expecting Kawhi to beat his timetable and be back with a month or 2 left in the regular season, I don't see that happening. This is the number 1 guy who would not rush back from an injury. So I think Paul George is going to have pretty much a full regular season as the guy with the LA Clippers. Keep in mind that only 3 seasons ago, back in 2018-19, he was the number 2 overall player in fantasy basketball. That was with Russell Westbrook as his teammate in Oklahoma City. And again, he is the unquestioned guy for the LA Clippers. There is no one remotely close to the usage rate that Russell Westbrook was putting up, especially in 2018-19 on this roster. I think we see Paul George have a monster defensive season. That year when he did finish in the top 3, he led the league in steals. I think his assists will rise this season. I think his 3-point volume is going to rise. It's still tough to justify Paul George over guys like Jokic, Doncic, Curry, Harden. I will admit that, for as high as I am on Paul George, it's difficult to pass on some of those ultra elite talents. But you look at his composite ADP right now on RotoWire.com, it's at 16.1. If you're getting him in that range, I think that is going to be a massive steal.
All right, now, since you watched the video until the end, we're going to give you 2 more bold predictions. Nick, I'm going to give you my predictions, but I want you to break them down and tell me the validity. I'm going to give you one negative one and one positive one. Let's start with one that we talked about a little bit off air, is Chris Paul in the high-stakes leagues is getting drafted on the 3-4 turn. I don't see him returning that kind of value just based on games played. What do you see for Chris Paul? Is he getting drafted too early?
I think he is. He went 29th in my NFBKC draft on Sunday night. So even before the range that you're referencing, personally, I just feel like it's been a little bit too good to be true in terms of his health the last 2 seasons. I mean, he went from being, legitimately one of the more injury-prone stars in fantasy basketball for the greater part of the last decade to all of a sudden he's missing like 1 or 2 games per year as he moves into his age 35, age 36 seasons. He's going to turn 37 this year. He's coming off of a long run to the NBA Finals. The offseason was a month shorter than normal. He's one of those guys, kind of much like LeBron, where if he's healthy, he's going to push to play. But I do think this track record of injuries throughout his career is going to come back to bite him at some point. And even if it doesn't, we saw his workload reduced last season. He played in a lot of games, but he was hovering closer to 30 minutes per game, whereas a lot of the elite guards in the league are up at 33, 34, 35 minutes per game. So even if Chris Paul stays healthy, I wouldn't be surprised if we see Phoenix do some kind of load managing on the fly with him.
My other bold prediction is that Donovan Mitchell, being drafted right now in the late second round, will finish as a top 10 overall fantasy player.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I go quite as high as top 10 with Donovan
Mitchell. Bold prediction.
Yeah, well, you got to go bold, right? I think he could finish in that range. I mean, if we see the Donovan Mitchell that we saw in the playoffs last year, then that's absolutely in the cards. The problem is the last few years, it feels like he had that great rookie season, that great sophomore season, and then the last 2 have kind of been about the same. The numbers are pretty much almost identical over those 4 years. So you'd like to see a little bit more of a level up improvement from Donovan Mitchell. That's going to mean taking the next step as a playmaker, racking up those assists, taking the next step as a defender, adding more steals. If he can do that, I think you're absolutely on the right track.
Zion Williamson has been the subject of a lot of debate. Give me a bold prediction or your thoughts on him heading into this season.
I hate to say it because I love Zion and I really want him to succeed, but I think he has a chance to be this season's biggest fantasy bust. I just think this is a situation that continues to get more and more concerning by the week. And it's something that I just don't want any part of, especially if you're in a weekly lineup league where you have to lock somebody into your lineup for 7 days. I think it's going to be kind of a mess.
To see all of our fantasy basketball content, rankings, you can see so right now for free. Go to rotowire.com/try.